cordial, I'd like to bring to order the legislative update meeting, special one. Ms. Cordial, could you please call the roll?
Board Member Durham.
Here.
Board Member Flores.
Here.
Board Member Goff.
Here.
Board Member McClellan.
Here.
Board Member Rankin.
Here.
And Board Member Schroeder.
Here.
Thank you.
I'll turn this over to Ms. Mello, please. We're going to talk about one bill that we're going to vote on and one bill that we are working on.
Correct. Thank you,
Please
Madam
proceed.
Chair. So the bill that we're gathered here today to take a vote on is House Bill 1222. The full title is Concerning the Systematic Review of Education Programs Enacted by the General Assembly for the Preschool through Secondary Public Education System. So that's a mouthful.
Indeed.
We've discussed this bill in a similar setting before, so I will give you a brief overview, but I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about what it does, and happy to answer questions if I'm not giving you enough information. Basically, as introduced, it requires that the state auditor, which is an existing office of the state auditor, it names the Commissioner of Education or her designee kind of throughout the bill to design a program review process to look at all of the education programs on some sort of ongoing schedule. The bill has kind of specifics around how to design that review process, how to conduct the reviews, and how to determine the schedule and the scope of reviews. There is some guidance in the bill about how to do that. Whether it's sufficiently detailed or not, I think, is one of the things we might want to talk about. The only role for the state board in the bill is you are to be presented to, but you don't get to vote or approve or do anything.
The results of the audit.
Actually, Madam Chair, no, it's the plan. So when the state auditor and the department put together the plan, they come and tell you about that. And when they put together the schedule, they come and tell you about that too. The proponents of this bill would take the position that there are a lot of education laws on the books in the state of Colorado. We've never taken the time to kind of go through them and figure out if some of them are obsolete, if they're duplicative, do we really need all of these? Have they reached their intended effect, right? Lots of things get enacted, and they have goals in mind, right? There's a reason why the legislature enacts certain policies. And so I think the proponents are trying to make the point that we don't know if all of these things are actually doing any good, and that this is a way to go about doing that.
Do they tell us what good is?
Madam Chair, they talk a lot about determining if the program has met legislative intent.
Okay.
I'll tell you, I think that's also one of the challenges with the bill, because legislative intent is not always crystal clear. In fact, is rarely crystal clear. And so I think that's a challenging standard for the auditor or anybody else to uphold. I want to turn it over to Steve and Jane to talk a little bit about kind of their concerns in more specific detail, and if you guys want to shoot it back to me, I can go through some of that too, because the three of us have spoken. The fiscal note does require 4 FTEs. Most of those are actually at the auditor's office, not the department here, but there is some FTE expense here. I think that is kind of my opening remarks. I'll just pause. Does anyone have any questions about kind of the more details of the bill, or what the bill does, or where it's coming from?
Colleagues on the phone, any questions?
I had a quick question, and it's more, I'm just curious to know if we've seen any further support in terms of sponsorship. Do we still just have Representative Becker, or is there additional sponsorship, anything bipartisan, or are people kind of waiting for this to take a little more substantive shape?
Board Member McClellan, there are no sponsors that have been added to the bill. I think people are waiting to see if it comes out of Education Committee on Monday or not.
Okay.
The bill is up for hearing on Monday. And one thing I want to emphasize that I didn't say earlier is all of our discussions that the 7 of you with me have had, that I have had with Jane, that I have had with Steve, that I have had with Dr. Anthus and the staff, nobody objects to the concept of reviewing programs. So it's not that the philosophical intent of it is necessarily problematic. it's the way this bill goes about accomplishing that philosophical goal that I think many people believe to be seriously flawed. So, I think to the extent, whatever you all decide to do today, how we communicate that at the Capitol, I will emphasize that point. So, okay, would it be appropriate, Madam Chair, for me to see if Steve and Jane want to
Exactly.
pipe up now?
Steve, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the problem, this bill has a number of problems, and I don't think they're related to the concept that it's not a good idea on a periodic basis to review what you've done or what the legislature has set as objectives and see whether or not the programs that they've put in place try to meet those objectives. I think problem one is the standard, and I agree, legislative intent is a very amorphous standard. It's often in the eyes of the beholder, and I would further say that I think if you're really going to effectively evaluate education programs, I mean, this is not a task for the state auditor, and I think they do a very good job in a number of venues. I just don't think this is one of them, because what really has to be evaluated is education outcomes, at least in terms of, I would guess if you were to look at a broad legislative intent, I doubt the legislature has passed any legislation where the intent wasn't at least to improve results and results on tests or improve results measured by some other standard. And I think quite often we provide the legislature, we provide a number of reports on the 50-some programs that do contain all of that information about comparing one year to another or showing progress over time on test scores or career and college readiness or kindergarten readiness, or you pick the one that you're the most interested in. And that information is available, and I think the legislature, I doubt if there's a failing in our current reporting, I don't think, and keep in mind this is by and large not a valuation of the department, but it's an evaluation of the districts and how well they are, how well they are educating children. And I don't think if the legislature wanted us to express a blunt opinion on the effectiveness, and by us I mean the department, that might be helpful. But I don't, to just have the auditor do sort of a green ice shade review of the data, I think that's done in probably 75% of the programs that we have on the books now, and I just don't see I don't see anything positive coming out of this bill.
Thank you. Jane?
Did you say my name?
I did. Do you have some comments?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I would agree with everything Steve said, and I'm not going to repeat it. Maybe just a couple of additions. The design of the process itself and the reporting back to the state board, repeating what Jennifer said, the only role the state board has in this bill as introduced is that we get a presentation about the schedule and the list of programs that will be reviewed on a particular cycle coming up. I have some concerns. I'm thinking today that that my other set of concerns are really sort of maybe what you'd call tier 2. I think the tier 1 concerns are around understanding what the real intent of this process, of this review is. Again, considering that the intent is to review statewide ed programs, I'm not sure there's an acknowledgement of the fact that it is actually, that becomes a district review in districts. And the idea of involving and requiring local districts to provide data is part of, is a big part of this point being that they're making. There again, there's another requirement that's placed on local districts, and I think it's it's not consistent with what both the board and the department and our local districts see as a very important factor, and that is how do we minimize the load on districts. And there are questions about whether this would have to be a new data collection. How does that impact not only employees, FTEs, but also just the load and the amount of work. The bill itself says one of the focus points is to minimize the impact on local districts, minimize the impact on classrooms, and the work being done in districts. But on the other hand, it turns around and requires districts to do this particular task. It also doesn't outline specifically whether that data, whether CDE has a role at all in the transmission of the data. And yet, not to mention the fact that we have state laws in place, which they do acknowledge would need to be honored, but it doesn't have enough detail about how that will actually work. And the other part of this is, I'll go back quickly to the state board role in this. Not only are we eliminated from the full chain of communication especially about any results or recommendations that come forth, in a way, it's a little bit of an undermining of the state board's constitutional established roles, duties, and powers. And there's an added part in that bill that specifically assigns a duty to the commissioner. And that's in consultation with the commissioner. This review process and timeline will be developed. I'm thinking that it really is the power and authority of the state board to determine commissioner duties. I don't know whether somebody's going to make a picky argument about this sort of being not under the title of the bill, but it is a concern to me, is that the authorities of the board are being usurped in more than one way. And lastly, I'll just say this, that the report being distributed to the House and Senate Ed committees and presented as part of the SMART Act hearings, at no point in that communicating whatever results may come, is the state board is not mentioned as a recipient of any of the product of this review.
Yeah. Thank you. Board Member Flores.
I just wonder if, is it Senator Becker or?
Representative.
Representative Becker.
Representative.
Representative Becker has, I'm sure there must be something in the rules that he does not like and would like to excise from the rules. And I wonder if, somebody would ask, what do you want to take away? Or, I mean, I can't help but think that's kind of the issue, because I can't imagine our department, not having, at the end of the year, not providing a report on our programs. I just can't imagine that the commissioner would not ask for such a document on these programs. So I just don't see the reason for it, other than what I just stated before, and that is that the representative wants to excise language from the laws, and that would be helpful too, if we knew exactly what those laws were that he wanted to, just cut away.
Thank you. Any other comments, folks? Are we ready to take a position on the legislation? Ms. Mello, do you have any more comments?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Durham?
I'll move, for purpose of discussion, I'll move that we oppose the legislation.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I seconded.
Thank you. Ms. Cordial, would you call the roll, please?
Board Member Durham.
Yes.
Board Member Flores,
Yes.
Board Member Goff,
Yes.
Board Member McClellan,
Yes.
Board Member Rankin,
Yes.
Board Member Schroeder.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes 6-0.
Thank you, Steve and Jane, for your offer to go next week. At this, I requested this meeting because I hoped that it would be helpful to let you know that we support your positions, and so you can go as representatives of the board rather than just independent members of the state board. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Yeah, that's
And-
appreciated.
So Steve and Jane, this is Jennifer. I'll get with you all via email over the weekend to coordinate a little bit for Monday.
Oh, I have one more thing.
Oh, please.
Steve, I understand you're going to get copies of our reports, hard copies, am I correct?
Yes.
So don't toss them.
That
when
is
you
correct.
Please don't toss them when you're finished with them. There are a couple of them
All right, I promise.
that I've been putting off printing, so I might as well.
We know you
Save a
like to
tree.
use that
make sure y'all-
filing system, Mr. Durham.
Yeah,
Yes, no, yeah.
I have a technical question about.
please, go ahead, Jane.
Was it your intent, Steve, to have just one set of copies, or is the idea to have them available for every member of the House Ed Committee?
Oh,
I think just bring one for show and tell. And,
Okay.
you know, if they want printed copies, I mean, those are all available electronically, and if they want printed copies, then we can provide them to them on short notice.
Excuse
yeah,
me.
Busy just sent us two last week, right? Two more reports that we're going over, Innovation and Best, if I'm not mistaken, yeah.
That's correct.
Board Member Flores.
Are you talking about that big pile of papers on the standards?
No.
No.
No, these
Just
are the
the-
reports.
No, no.
The reports that
Program
are shared with the House and Senate Ed committee members, and then we also share them with you for the programs that are implemented.
So last week, we got the report on innovation schools for the current year. For the past year, we got the report on the best schools. A week before, I believe there was something else. I'm just behind on even
computers.
catching up on the reading, but there'll be a nice show and tell, that's for sure. Ms. Mello, go for it.
Does anybody have the little red wagon we can use?
I have a green one.
We have a gray one.
Well, anything. I think not only is it's a message, it's also probably necessary.
Yeah.
I have a question. This is Joyce.
Go ahead, Joyce.
I just didn't hear it quite clearly. What is it that Board Member Durham is taking to that committee meeting?
Just a list of all the reports and a copy of each report. Not as big a stack as one might think, but there's an awful lot. There's an awful lot that we need to pay attention to.
I would like to make a recommendation. Jane made a very good point about what our duties are, and I think it may be a one-pager on the CDE website. I think that might be something very directly related to what she was talking about, that they may not, well, I'm pretty sure they're not even aware of. Yeah. I'm surprised the bill writer didn't pick up on that, but that is one document that might be considered for every person that's on the committee.
It's a good idea.
Are you talking about are you just our powers and duties?
Yes. Yes.
Because
yes, that's
on the state board website, there's a link, and it's on our homepage that's called State Board Governance. And
yes.
If you click on that link, it's got all the links to our ledge priorities, our powers and duties, our operating procedures, our ledge operating procedures. It's already on the website, Joyce. But I will never disagree with the idea of highlighting certain things, on the cycles, and that maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea for a while.
I don't want to overpower them with paperwork, but you made some points that are very directly, I believe, related to this bill, and maybe just a one-pager, but it may be on a couple different links. Very simple, but bulleted, you know, just as simple as possible, but it alerts them to what our job really is, and I really don't think they know, but I think that would be very powerful. The way you described it, I thought was very powerful, and I think that might help in the committee.
We'll work on pulling that together,
don't know.
and we'll make the strongest possible case we can on Monday, and I'll start talking to legislators, and we will we'll see how the committee goes on Monday. Madam Chair?
Yeah, you know,
What?
Oh,
yeah. Okay,
would it
thank
be
you.
appropriate for me to move to the next item on our agenda?
I believe so. I believe we've exhausted this one.
So this just turned out to be kind of a lucky opportunity for us. As you know, we've been working very hard on a draft of an accountability-related piece of legislation on your behalf. The legislative process is inevitable that things change constantly and all the time. And we were at a point where we felt like we needed to come back to you all as board members and just say, here's where we are. We want checking in to make sure you're still good with where we are. And then this meeting came around, and so we thought, well, what a great opportunity to update everyone at the same time. So as you all will remember, about 3 weeks ago, we distributed a draft of the legislation pretty widely. I mean, pretty much anyone who wanted it got it. It was not secret. It was, you know, we sent it out to the world. We received a great deal of feedback, very substantive feedback, very meaningful feedback, a lot of questions. The bill itself is a little hard to understand, and there's nothing I can do about that. I certainly wish I could. But I want to reassure you as a board that it has been a very, very robust and sincere stakeholder engagement process. Anyone who wanted to talk, we talked to them. We, you know, compiled all of the comments we got. You know, we took it very seriously. And we got great feedback. There were a lot of really good suggestions. Sometimes when, you know, we could see, wow, lots of people are confused by that language. Clearly we need to fix that. So it's been an incredibly helpful and valuable process. We, as a result of that feedback, are proposing a handful of changes to the draft that you saw 3 weeks ago. And I just want to run through those. I mean, there's a whole bunch of small changes. I'm going to run through the substantive ones with you really quickly. If you don't like what you're hearing, please tell me, because that's what I need to know. So one of the key things that we're going to change is, as you remember, sorry, this is a little tricky to explain, so sorry that I'm going a little slow here. One of our original goals was to address the challenge of schools and districts who kind of bounce on and off the clock frequently. Right, so they're on, they're off, they're on, they're off. Every time they go off, the clock restarts. And one, there's not an ability for the department to give them a sustained level of support to make more improvements. But also, one could argue that that may not be the best education for the kiddos that are in those systems. So the original proposal was to say it takes 2 years to restart the clock. So if you're on in year one, that's year one. If the next year you're not on the clock, that's great. We're happy. That doesn't count against you. But if the following year you come back on the clock, you're at year 2. So you don't get to start over again every single time you come off. You get to start over again when you've demonstrated sustained progress. We're going to modify that. Our intention is to modify that slightly. And what we want to do is make sure that we're focusing on what we think the real problem is, or the most serious component of the problem, and that is schools and districts that, let's say, are on the clock for 3 years in a row, 4 years in a row. They come off 1 year, and then they go right back on, and the clock starts all over again. So we really want to make sure that we're able to address that. I think the original concept was a little too broad, however, because it was also picking up situations where if you kind of flip the coin and you have a district or school who may kind of blip onto the clock, but is not very likely to stay there and is not going to be there for a very long time. You know, maybe it's a data issue that year, maybe it's a size issue. I mean, there are reasons why sometimes someone will come on the clock briefly and then they get right back off. So I can, if anyone's interested, I'm happy to, me or Alyssa, probably Alyssa, can individually walk you through kind of the technicalities of what that looks like. But again, conceptually, we thought we really want to be able to focus the efforts on those that that are experiencing the most performance problem. And we don't want to have to spend a lot of time and effort, because resources are limited, on ones that may be an aberration. So we'll change the language to reflect that. Alyssa, are you on the call? No.
I am.
Oh, you
I'm
are?
right here.
Okay. Do you want to add anything? I mean, I don't think we want to get super technical right now, but did I say anything that concerned you?
I think that makes, nope, you're good.
So we really want to focus on the chronic problem as
Right.
opposed to the occasional, and is there a way to draft legislation so that we'll focus on chronic rather than on the anomaly?
That's exactly what we want to do, Board Member Durham, and we're still trying to figure out that language, you know, how to amend the draft you previously saw to do
Well,
that.
and what's the evidence that it's chronic, particularly in those districts where size can significantly affect the on and off issue?
So
That's
we'll
a
work on the language.
technicality I can't understand.
Yeah. Well, trust me, it's highly technical, and you all have amazing staff who actually understand it at a very deep level. The second main change I think you will see when you see the next draft, if you are okay with this, right now, statute is rather specific in defining how performance indicators are calculated. It doesn't go quite so far as to put the actual mathematical formula in statute, but it's pretty close. And the statute we're looking at was written back when we had CSAPs, and those calculations all made sense in that environment. We don't have CSAPs anymore. The tests we have today may not be the tests we have 10 years from now. And the law is too narrow to allow you all and the department and everyone to make the changes to achieve the same goal. We're still calculating achievement. We're still calculating growth. We're still doing all that. We may just do it slightly differently. And the statute is so restrictive that it's difficult to do that. So I think from staff's perspective, this is a fairly technical change. One of the clear pieces of feedback we got when we put the bill out there for public comment was nobody else thinks it's purely a technical change. We get lots and lots and lots of questions and concerns about this, and it was difficult for people to understand what the intent behind it was. So the version, again, the previous version of the bill that I'm kind of referring back to, it was kind of a surgical approach. So it surgically went through statute and deleted some language that was really precise. That, like I said, didn't go over well out in stakeholder world. So what we're going to try next, if this is acceptable to you, is to basically take all of that language. So take a much broader swath of language out of statute and make it clear that the board has rulemaking authority to determine how those calculations happen. And I'm just going to stop talking and see if you guys have questions about that, and I'm really happy Alyssa's on the phone.
Well, I have a concern. There's certainly criticism out there in the big world that we are adding too many variables to the measure and therefore diluting it significantly and diluting it from achievement to other items. I don't know whether this effort allows that potential.
I would like, Alyssa, do you mind speaking to that?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think it depends on how we write it up, but I think we can write with that in mind.
Okay.
I think the idea was to be real clear that the performance indicators are around achievement, and you can specify the content
Achievement and
areas.
growth rather than attendance.
And growth.
Graduation and all those
Yeah,
other things,
none of that-
which are
yeah,
important, but they shouldn't be the drivers, is what I
Yeah.
hear out there in
And
the
right
world.
now, absolutely. Right now, attendance isn't in there, but I think we can write it so it's clear. You know, the board needs a measure of achievement, as measured like on the state assessment to levels of proficiency or college and career readiness, or being on track to college and career readiness. So we can write that broad, and then the exact metrics of whether we're using the mean scale score or the percent at benchmark or those different things would be left to board rules. So as we learn, if our assessments change, as we evolve with data privacy and better understanding of how the numbers and the metrics work, we can go back through rulemaking and adjust and evolve it as needed, as opposed to right now where we're kind of in this place where we're stuck with the details and statute, but having learned a lot and having tests change from where they are now.
Okay, that's a good goal.
Does that make sense?
Those of you on the phone, do you have any comments, questions?
No.
No.
Val?
Yeah.
It's just, I think what we're going to do is wait and see what the final product looks like. I think that's what we need to do.
Okay, thanks, Joyce. Val?
Yes, thank you. I'm concerned about attendance because, you know, we don't want to get kids who are not responsible for attendance to be, what's the term for, to be castigated in any way, because sometimes it's not their fault. It's not that their fault that they're not, it's not there. And I don't know, I mean, there's problems at home and stuff. We do know that there are kids who are truant, I mean, and that happens possibly when they're older, but.
So Val, the conversation, for example, is about Washington, D.C., where there are students who graduated who were not in school for about half of the school year. It's caused a lot of consternation. There's some question whether they've really met academic expectations. Right. And so as long as we maintain.
I'm not speaking about that.
Right.
I'm not aware of that, but I know it happens at schools. I know it happened at a school where I was at, but I didn't know it was that prevalent. I wasn't
don't know
aware.
that it is, but it did occur, and it's caused pretty much a nationwide conversation about whether we really are graduating students who are career ready, who are academically strong. And for that reason, we need to maintain those expectations as part of our accountability
And
system.
are we talking about school-dependent kids? We're not talking about kids who, at home, may be getting that education through travel, through other means? I mean, are we?
As long as they demonstrate proficiency,
okay,
that's one thing, right?
Right.
And that's my point, is to make sure that we continue to have the academic expectations in our accountability system.
Okay.
Not about telling them where to be when.
Okay. And I'm just concerned about penalizing students who may not be there because of it's not their fault, because their parents, you know, they're young and such.
And Dr. Flores, I think we can, I hear you. I know that Alyssa can hear you. We'll make sure the draft doesn't go anywhere close to that.
Thank you.
Commissioner, do you have a comment?
No, I think that's fine.
Okay.
In terms of process, I am hopeful that we'll have a new draft sometime middle of next week.
Were those the only two things?
There's a whole bunch of smaller things. Those are the substantive things. And yeah, so when you see the new draft, you're going to see a lot of changes. I think, again, from a policy perspective, that's where we think we're making some policy shifts, so wanted to bring those to your attention. I'm hopeful we'll have a draft towards the middle of next week. I don't control that process. We have great drafters at the Capitol. They have lots of bills they're working on, so we're hoping to get that as soon as we can. We will share it with you all then. We'll try to share some supporting materials, because I acknowledge, again, this is just a hard bill to read. It's a hard bill to read and understand what we're really doing. So we'll make sure we have the wraparound information to say, this part is doing this, even though on reading it, no one would think that. We will also share the draft and those materials with the world again. You know, we'll send it back out to everybody. Because we've got just about, well, session is halfway over tomorrow, so we are almost exactly halfway through, which is not a good thing to not have your bill introduced in the you want bills introduced sooner rather than later in most cases. The process we've done on this one's been really important. I think it's going to pay off once we do introduce the bill, but we can't wait forever to introduce the bill.
Got it.
So I'm hopeful that in the next couple of weeks we introduce the bill. There may still be changes we have to make to it in the committee process through amendments, and those may be because you all find something that we didn't catch before it got introduced, or stakeholders do. So introduction of the bill doesn't end the conversation. The conversation continues, but we have a bill number that we can use in those conversations. So that's where we are in the process. We'll stay in touch with you all by email as that develops.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, folks? I have one that I thought of as I listened to Board Member Durham's explanation as to why we have this assess this bill that's supposed to assess our programs. I agree with him that most legislation is about achievement, but a lot of it is also about safety. And I'm wondering, I would like to know whether our safety type bills have either a report or some kind of an outcome, or whether the outcome is just the assumption that by virtue of doing these things, things will be more safe for kids, but we don't really have a way of measuring, partly because we're trying to prevent bad things from happening. It's hard to measure what doesn't happen as a reality.
Madam Chair, I guess
Has that been part of that conversation?
What I would say is it depends on, every bill is different, right? So often bills are introduced and passed, and they say, and the department shall prepare a report as to the effectiveness of this. Sometimes bills pass and don't say that. Sometimes bills pass and they say this law will go away in 5 years unless the legislature reenacts it. Sometimes they don't say that. So I don't think there's any pattern. And on the school safety stuff, that is actually an area where there's some other departments that have pretty meaningful roles in that, particularly the Department of Public Safety. Right. And so I guess we can certainly look into those particular reports or data or whatever is available there.
I'm just kind of curious whether that was on the mind of this individual who wrote this, whether it wasn't about achievement, but that it was about some of those bills. There have been a flurry of them.
Well, I was thinking of good citizenship.
Mr. Durham?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think is an example of your concern, for example, the anti-bullying kinds of bills, which generally are precipitated by an incident, by a tragic incident of some kind. But I don't remember whether we actually produce or the districts produce any data on whether this kind of approach has reduced the incidence of bullying. And is that the kind of concern that I doubt that the sponsor had those concerns, but is that something about which we should be concerned?
Well, again, we can't measure what doesn't happen. So the only thing we could possibly measure might be a decrease per number of students. But some of those things are pretty hard to measure, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we do.
I think they are too. Do we do that, or do we try? Do you know? Does anybody?
Commissioner?
No?
Yeah, this is Katie.
And I have.
Just a sec, Jane. Yeah, we'll get you in.
We do collect a set of data on safety and sort of incidents and discipline incidents of students and that sort of stuff. So we have that information. We'll have to go back and check for sure if we ever write a report on that. But we sort of collect it, and we tend to be more of a repository of information there, so that if asked, you know, we can look at those trends over time. I do think we include some of that data in other related reports, such as Mr. Durham's suggestion on like bullying, because we can look at the incidents, you know, and sort of say that those might be tangentially connected. So I don't recall a specific school safety report, and I know that there are some things we just collect a checklist on from our districts, like they are required to have school safety plans. So we collect sort of an assurance from them saying, check, yes, we have our school safety plan, but we don't collect every single school safety plan. So there's a whole continuum of the type of data we collect and then how we present that in reports.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Goff?
Yeah, just what Katie said, plus bullying prevention is a good example. Any of the grants that are distributed, part of the application outlines what they need to be reporting on. And if I'm not mistaken, most of the grant applications require some evaluation component in which that kind of data, as far as results, is included in their grant reports. Is that
Okay.
not right?
That's
Yes.
helpful. Yeah, thank you. We might think about that as we look back on this particular issue. Anything else, folks?
I have one real quick one.
Sure, please, Ms. Goff.
It's really just really quick. It's a what if, and it is in relation to the program review bill as well. As we're talking about this change to the accountability system, one of the areas that was mentioned in the fiscal note for review was accountability. And we've had an accountability law for a long time, but the one we're operating under right now was 2009. So it does qualify for that at least 6 years category. So in the meantime, what if we have a new accountability bill, but we have had accountability program for at least 6 years? What are we looking at as far as review? It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. We'd be going back to our current, which would then be a former accountability system, and doing a program review of it when we have a new bill about to be implemented.
Great
So we
point.
have a review clock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but do I have to
Well,
explain it to
I mean,
people?
Yeah, that's good.
I mean, to me, that's kind of a thought.
Yeah,
that,
it is a thought.
And the potential of other new, whether they're brand new or whether they're embellishments to current law, as those come along, is it the category that calls the review shot, or is it the actual program in place? Because we could be operating under, there will be at least a transition period in this accountability picture,
That's right.
apparently, from now on.
Okay, add that to your list on Monday.
Yeah, I will, I have.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Board
What
Member
example?
Flores.
I just wanted to ask about this, this panel or panels that will come about because of the governor's request to have this program to review education. So, I mean, I know
You mean
there's a
the
lot.
subcommittees of,
There's a lot to read, but why add another committee on so many committees that are going on? Is this?
Commissioner?
Yes, so Board Member Flores, thank you. So the Education Leadership Council, we've been kind of walking you guys through that for the last, I'm not sure when the governor appointed it, but so there's a whole set of reasonings around why he reestablished the executive order. And then this is sort of, we're now, the goal from Representative Rankin and Representative Hamner, who were kind of leaders in that, was to get feedback from various stakeholders around some themes. Those subcommittees are on the themes that we heard, and just sort of a vehicle to then go out deeper to different communities and get their feedback on those. So it's not, it's meant to all feed up into this common vision and be cross-sector, cross-community, organizational, rather than just having it come from one entity like the department or the governor or whatever. So some of it may tread similar ground, but I think from the perspective of some of the leaders is we need to continually sort of reestablish and recommit to the vision for education in Colorado, and that's what this is attempting to do.
Thank you. Yeah. So maybe whoever is responsible, we can get kind of dates on when they meet.
Yep, we have no dates yet, so
There are
that
no
email that was sent out was just kind of orienting you to the type of subcommittees, just saying that you're going to be, you can go to any ones. None of those dates have been set yet. It was just sort of,
I checked the website.
yeah, bringing you along, and as soon as we get those, Realistically, they probably won't be established for another couple weeks, but because invitations are starting to go out, we didn't want you to not get one and then hear from your constituents that they're getting one, and then you'd be like, wait, why haven't we been connected? So we will make sure you get all those dates as they're scheduled.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, if we all agree, then the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all.
3:15. Thank you, Ms. Mello.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy Friday.
Thanks,
See you next week, guys.
everybody.
Thank you.